Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sasha Farbach. In the Chinese capital, Beijing, President Xi Jinping met Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov on Wednesday, describing China-Russia relations as precious amid what both sides portray as widening global instability and a breakdown in international order. The meeting comes as disruptions continue in the Strait of Hormuz, and the U.S. hints at new negotiations between the United States and Iran potentially taking place this week. We discuss the latest now with our guest, François Godement, Special Advisor, Institut Montaigne. Good to have you with us. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I want to begin with exactly the words there, precious relations between Russia and China. How do you interpret that? Is this a surprise? Does this mean there's more movement closer to these two countries?
I think anything that does not repeat that we have a strategic partnership without limit, which was the phrase that was used just before the invasion of Ukraine, anything under that does not qualify as an escalation, so to speak, of the relationship. I think the Chinese leadership is currently in a very prudent and careful mode on just about every front for a number of reasons.
Mm-hmm. But having said that, the Russians have also said, I mean, you mentioned that anything under that, but they have used a different word, very close to that Russia, I'm quoting here from Lavrov, Russia can unconditionally compensate for the shortage of resources that emerged because of that. So how do we interpret that in terms of Russia stepping in, helping China with oil?
Well, I mean, very clearly, China is more concerned than Western commentators often say by the consequences for its economy of the Gulf War, of the war with Iran. And it's concerned also because of shortages. And these shortages also include fertilizers, do not only include oil, they include a number of materials. And it's clear that Russia is going to go all out and also hope to profit, of course, hope to get higher prices from the situation. But I would say this is opportunistic. This is, of course, an important cooperation. It's not necessarily strategic because I note on other fronts that China currently is careful about its declarations and careful perhaps in anticipation of the meeting with Donald Trump in May, now scheduled in May in Beijing.
Mm-hmm. Also, you mentioned the word opportunistic there. Also, if we look at the United States now, they've announced that this blockade of the Strait of Hormuz is now, what they're saying, fully implemented. I mean, it basically cuts off anything that goes through. So looking at that, that's a big pressure point. Can Russia feasibly step in and help China with what they're losing? Or what kind of pressure point is the United States maybe aiming at here vis-a-vis China?
Of course, the United States is aiming at the so-called shadow fleet that leaves from Iran. And in the past, the U.S. often has given a pass to China for oil from Iran. And even during the previous conflicts, that was the case. So this is new. But we don't know how long this will apply. We don't know how much Russia can compensate through land lines or through other components of its phantom fleet, so to speak, reminding you that the U.S. currently has also given a pass to sanctions over oil from Russia. So the paradox, of course, is that by putting a very heavy pressure on Iran, because the international market is interconnected, the U.S. has to give up some of its pressure on Russia.
Mm-hmm. But also, I want to just ask you a follow-up on that. You said this is unusual for the United States to do. And we know that a lot of that imported oil is basically primarily for China. So why is the United States now, let's say, raising the ante in this front? Do they feel that they want Beijing to be involved in some kind of pressure on Iran?
Yes, it's probable that they want Beijing to feel the pain very concretely, even though the pain will also extend to U.S. allies and friends in East Asia and in Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia is particularly concerned by the risk of oil scarcity in the coming weeks. What we don't know, of course, is how long will that pressure apply. But I think this is a direct reason why China currently does not antagonize too strongly and publicly the United States. Xi Jinping has had his first direct utterance on the conflict by a meeting in Beijing, the Crown Prince of the Emirates, of the United Emirates, and he's come out with a very blunt statement that essentially says, let's respect international law, let's restrain, the situation is complex, but he hasn't put the finger as much on the U.S. as one would have guessed from previous Chinese statements.
All right. So he doesn't want to antagonize the United States, but at the same time, I just want to use a source here that CNN is quoting U.S. intelligence that apparently the Chinese are preparing or amidst of making preparations to supply Iran with air defense. So if that's true, I mean, is he playing two different sides, or what do you make of that kind of claim?
This is a double game that has always been happening with China. It's the same with Ukraine. Remember the pledges by China in the beginning to prevent export of drones from the main Chinese maker to the region, to either Russia or Ukraine at the time. That has gone, of course, overboard. And in part, we know what the U.S. decides to reveal publicly. And sometimes the U.S. goes public. Sometimes it tolerates a level of double game because it thinks the level of double game is still under a certain threshold.
Mm-hmm. Also, if we look at the Asian markets today, I mean, they're in the green across the board, a 6-week high. Is this maybe because of they're hopeful or know something about these negotiations between the U.S. and Iran, or is this false hope?
We've seen swings day by day, and I can't tell you whether these days echo or rumor is real, but it's clear that the market thinks that the U.S. president can change his mind, and the market is not completely wrong in saying that. 2, they are looking for any sign of starting negotiation. If I may, the Iranians themselves have been relatively restrained when they talk about the negotiations. They come out very hard when they talk about the blockade. But when they talk about the negotiations, they hint that they were about to succeed, that they can restart. It's clear that they are not committing to a refusal, and they hope to get more from Donald Trump.
All right, it's a hard game to predict, but what do you think ultimately China is aiming at here? I mean, it's a tough one, but what do you think they're going to be trying to do in the next few days and weeks?
I don't think they are going to become the sole support for Iran. I think they are balancing their relations with the rest of the region. They're collecting the benefits from international public opinion that very often is opposed to the U.S. intervention and to the U.S. actions in the war. So let's say they're making themselves popular, but that doesn't, it's brownie points, but it doesn't count much in reality. They are very attentive to the economic situation, including inside China, and that's also a parameter. We Europeans are, of course, very vulnerable to the situation in the Gulf, but we underestimate how much China will also become vulnerable. There is also a question of the need for them to keep exporting, and if there is a global downturn, it's not at all good for the economy. They have no other engine, by the way, currently working in the Chinese economy than exports. So they need, as they call it, a stable international climate, and that I think is a major consideration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's also, as you said there, the Chinese president alluded to also many times, also with meeting with the Prime Minister of Spain, no return to the law of the jungle. So they're a veiled comment to the United States. We'll see how it works out. Thank you so much for all those comments this morning, analysis. That was our guest, François Godement, Special Advisor, Institut Montaigne. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching World Talks. But stay right here on TVP World for more news and commentary. Goodbye.